Movie Bears podcast with Brad, Jim, and Will. What have they been watching lately? They're husky, hairy, huggable homos. Movie Bears podcast.
Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and along with my wonderful co-hosts, we review films either current or classic on this show. And this week, we're coming at you with a current film, came out a couple weeks ago, The Matrix Resurrections. Now that the holidays are past, we've had a chance to catch up with a whole bunch of movies, including this one, and we are excited to talk to you about this film. As always, if you are joining us live, we'd love to hear from you in the live chat. Be sure to say hello. Let us know your thoughts on The Matrix Resurrections. And if you're listening through the magic of digital tape delay, via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, however you access our show. We'd love to hear your thoughts too. Feel free to shoot us a comment on our different social media platforms. We'd love to hear from you. Speaking of people I'd love to hear from, I'm already bored of my own voice, so let's bring some others in. Jim Pugliafico is with us in the virtual studio. Hey, sweetheart, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's been a break, and I don't know, these year-end breaks are always weird for me because like we generally have like a week off, which is a lot, and you kind of get in this kind of reset, mindset that like you're resetting and you forget a lot of things. And I got back to my work computer after a week away, and I'm like, oh God, what is my login? Like I I almost forgot my login. So but movies never stop, thankfully. We were able to see a few of them on the break, so that was good. This was one of them we saw just before. I don't even remember the day we saw it. It was just before Christmas or just after, but we're ready to talk about it.
Well, so glad that you are here to help us talk about this film. Definitely jazzed to get into it with you. Will Lindis is also here. Welcome, Will. How was your holiday break?
Hey, Brad. Hey, Jim. Mostly pretty good. I think there's something about that little week between Christmas and New Year's, which, we took that off. You all had travel plans. I had just sort of like reset around the house plans. And there's just something that feels so weirdly disconnected from just time as a whole, right? Like, it doesn't feel like it's no longer the old year. It's not quite the new year. It just sort of exists in limbo. So I used that opportunity to watch a ridiculous number of movies, and do some video editing and just sort of like play in kind of film space. We've been hunkering low on the other side of COVID in the new year. Had a bit of we have a bit of a visit from Miss Rona in the house right now as well. So we're sort of set up in different rooms of the house right now. It's fine. It's not to make light of what everyone else, like the very serious scenario that a lot of people are experiencing. But for us, Scott's triple vaxxed, double vaxxed and boosted, and like it's not, he's having very minimal symptoms at best. Like, I mean, it's it's
doing okay.
So all of that. Yeah. And it, on top of the whole, like, curveball of everything with time, there's sort of that, which is also sort of a weird time crunch. So I'm so excited to talk movies, especially this one, because I think I know where Jim lands on this one, because I have a Twitter account. I don't know where Brad lands at all. I'm very curious.
It's gonna be a surprise. We'll see what you think.
Damn Twitter tipping my hand.
Oh goodness. Well, we'll definitely hoping that Wiggles is all better very soon, even if it is very mild, and I'm thankful to hear that it is. I know having to quarantine in different parts of the house and fight over who gets which dog and win. It's never an easy thing. So I hope things are back to normal soon. As Jim and Will mentioned, we definitely have some thoughts on The Matrix Resurrections. As we do with most of our reviews on this show, we're going to talk about the movie spoiler free for probably 10 or 15 minutes. And then we'll dive into our spoiler section. So if you have not yet seen The Matrix Resurrections, but you're curious what we thought, feel free to hang out with us. We will provide you a safe space and plenty of warning before it's unsafe. But Jim, Will, are you ready to dive into the discussion that will be this film?
There's two pills out in front of you guys. There's a red pill and a blue pill. Now's the right chance to take your pill of choice.
That's what they say.
I'm trying to get away from daily pills, except for the one blue pill a day I take. But I don't think it's the same blue pill that Neo was offered. I don't think it's PrEP, is it? I don't know.
I mean, they never said it wasn't, so that's now the fiction, right? That's now. No, I'm sorry, that's not the fiction.
There's a
that's
blue
now the
PrEP
canon.
and a red PrEP pill. So gotta make a choice.
Whoa. All right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're going to go ahead and jump into our discussion. We've got a bunch of folks hanging out with us online already. Funny how a Matrix movie brings all the folks to the yard. Folks, as we're doing this, we'd love to hear from you. Please say hi. Tell us what you thought of the film. Jump on in. But here we go. Our discussion of The Matrix Resurrections. All right. So, Will, if you don't mind kicking us off, give us a brief setup of this movie. I know it's fairly complicated, but I'm sure you can come through with something great. And what are your initial thoughts on this movie? Is it something that you really enjoyed? Did you wish you hadn't seen it? Where did you land?
So this is The Matrix Resurrections. This is the fourth of the Matrix films, unless you count like the story that was in the Animatrix, which was the animated shorts, and the story which continued in The Matrix Online, which is all canon as well. But this is the fourth film. And this one, once again, directed by Lana Wachowski. Only one of the Wachowski sisters is here. But this film explores, well, what it is to be the Matrix again. The world that's layered on top of the world, the way that controls the masses through basically hypnotizing them into thinking that the world that they live in is the real world, as opposed to the real concerns of the real world. That's the complicated matrixy shit that happens, right? The world within a world. Once again, we are introduced to Mr. Anderson, played by Keanu Reeves, who is the central role where he has to figure out once again what is real, what isn't, and figure out his place as the one or whatever is going on here, which we'll get into in this new iteration of the Matrix. I talked around a lot in that. It's basically just because this movie gets into spoiler territory super, super, super quick. And that's just the nature of these stories. They tend to be very plot dense. And I think with the Matrix itself, let me rephrase. With the Matrix Resurrections itself, I think that this is going to be a very, very highly divisive film. I think there's going to be people who land on the very high side of it and people land on the very low side of it. And that's okay. And it's all just really kind of how you vibe with very specifically what this film is putting down. For me, 100% vibed. It is one of, I think it and Dune are kind of my two favorite, like, big blockbusters of the year. And I appreciated what this movie did because I think there's a tendency sometimes, especially in serialized filmmaking these days, especially here, 2020, 2021, to look at nostalgia as a way of sort of like placating us, saying, hey, remember the cool thing from before? Here's more of the same. What I love so much about Matrix Resurrections is it's not really interested in doing that. It's interested in exploring instead of just like using nostalgia as a kind of like a weapon against its audience, it's more interested in exploring, well, what does that really mean within the context of the narrative? This is a movie that is both sequel, remake, and reboot all at the same time, all in one pass. And I appreciate that. It is a huge swing narratively, and that's what I want from films. I want things that make big swings, not just kind of playing it safe. I think it's Keanu Reeves is just, he's great in this because it's almost like he was born to play the Neo role. The rest of the cast too is stellar. Carrie Ann Moss is back. There's a role that I won't say who it is, but the actor is played by Yahya Abdul Mateen II, who we also saw in Watchmen. Killer performance. My favorite was newcomer Jessica Henwick. She played a character named Bugs. And I thought that she added a lot to the film, without detracting from the main things it is. Look, there's going to be a lot of things said about this movie. I think there's probably, my hunch is there's going to be a lot of things said in in the rest of this podcast, and that's totally fine. Like, I feel like if everyone came out of this movie liking it, I don't think it would be as good as it is. I think what makes it so good is it took the big swings. It decided to really sort of remix what it could be and choose to be a little caustic in places, choosing its own narrative strength over sort of like an easy choice for the audience. So I don't know if you guys liked it or loved it, but I'm super okay if you guys didn't. But for me, this was one of the top films of the year.
Rock on. Well, Will, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts. While you were talking, we had a couple folks jump into the live chat with us. Tony G says, Happy New Year, you handsome hirsute men. Hey, Tony, thanks so much. Happy 2022 to you, friend. Good to see you. And Bobby Miller says, hey, guys. He's watching live right now. And Jim, he loves your glasses. Just FYI.
Okay.
So welcome. Hey, guys. Thanks for joining us. Jim, you got your glasses on. Seems fitting we go to you next to hear your thoughts. Are your glasses on because you were a huge fan of this film? Or where did you come down?
My glasses are on because, I just wanted to zhuzh up the show a little bit, to be honest. But yeah, boy, here, where am I going to start with this movie? I don't think I struggle with The Matrix Resurrections, the new movie, as I struggled with even the original film. And I know the original film was groundbreaking kind of in a lot of ways, right? Visually, obviously, special effects wise, I think it set a bar for other movies to come after it, which is really cool. Also, it kind of helped make a star out of Keanu Reeves, which we're all grateful for because, I think he's pretty awesome in just about everything he's in. I don't really dig the Neo character, especially in Resurrections. I struggle a little bit with this franchise because I don't fully understand it. I really struggle to understand what it's trying to say. And I know we have two worlds. We have like the real world and we have the Matrix, and, people get drawn into one. And the movie's very complex. Probably a more of a thinking than feeling movie, at least for me, although that could be argued at least in this movie, because I think there's an element in this movie that I really liked and I wish was explored more, which was the relationship between Neo and Trinity in this movie. That's the part of this movie that I did like. But overall, I know that this movie has a lot of fans. This franchise has a lot of fans, and I'm glad that it seems like a lot of them liked it. But I do know some fans of Matrix that didn't like this movie very much, for whatever reasons that they had. My reasons were, I think it's a well-made movie. I think it looks fine. I think it recaptures a lot of what the original movies or the previous three movies set forth. it brings us back to the Neo character. I don't think that's any kind of a spoiler, even though stuff happens in the first 3 movies. And yeah, I just don't think it really kind of held together. I did get a few laughs out of this movie though, which was good. And we'll get into those a little bit in spoilers. They all have to do kind of with the Neo character, who, I mean, this is a very complex movie. I think people who like to take apart plot and figure that stuff out are gonna there's a lot to dig into here. It's a dense film that the plot has multifacets and characters that are also multifaceted. But for me, it just doesn't work, unfortunately. Like I said, as a film, I think it's fine. I think fans of the series should see it, obviously. But if you're looking to catch up with something like I was and try to hang on for what this movie was trying to say, I just don't think it works very well. I don't think it branched off into enough new stuff to make it capture a new audience.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts as well. By the way, Will Durr, who was with us on our last episode, is here too. Hey, Will. He says, loving the shades, Jim. So there you go. Even if the movie wasn't a big hit for you, the shades appear to be.
Jim, without falling out of your chair, can you give us a little bit of like a, for those watching live, for those listening to audio, this is complete like waste of time what I'm about to ask, but those watching live, Jim, can you give us your like best like Neo like dodging bullets?
Yeah, sure. The creaking of the chair is the best part of this whole thing.
I love it.
Oh goodness. All right.
That's a strawberry.
All right. So for me, Will, you mentioned you didn't really know my thoughts on this. I've been kind of quiet on social media the last few weeks. I haven't really been on much.
Licorice pizza.
I know. Licorice pizza finally got me to break my Facebook silence. Boy, this movie was a big stinker for me. I'm sorry. I liked the original film, not so much the sequels. I never really jumped onto the Matrix train with most people, I guess. So I kind of knew going into this movie that it might not be for me, and I was okay with that. I didn't like it for a lot of the same reasons that you mentioned, Jim. I feel like it's a giant rehash of the original film, especially, and it didn't really do a whole lot new here, besides add some dimensions that left me really scratching my head as to why they happened and how things work. I feel like the movie didn't really answer some of the questions that it sets up. And anytime movies do that for me, I get frustrated. I know lots of indie art house movie people who are like, yes, give me all the questions with no answers. Let me jerk off to the ambiguity. But that's not me. And no shade to those who are like that. I think that's very cool if you enjoy that. I just feel like if I'm going to invest 2.5 fucking hours in a movie, like I want some answers, please. And I didn't get them. So I don't want to spend a lot of time being super negative on the film. We've got some things I definitely want to talk about during the spoiler section. So we can definitely maybe chat about a few things there. One thing I will say, though, I did appreciate being able, sorry, I'm watching Jim like throw cats off his desk. You should be dodging cats instead of
deja vu, as Neo does.
Yeah, I did.
It was a cat. It was a cat on a desk in this movie. I just want to say that.
Yeah. I did enjoy though Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss being back together in this film. We can certainly talk in spoilers about how all of that was made possible to have these characters reuniting. It was great to see them together again for sure. But I was just, I don't know. I was kind of disappointed. Like I went in even thinking, okay, even if the story doesn't do it for me, the effects and the visuals are going to be amazing. It's going to be fantastic. I feel like some of the visuals here were worse than some of the original movies in some of the effects that they did, especially with the bullet time and like deflecting bullets. We saw it in the trailer. It's not a spoiler. I'm just wondering why a movie from 2021 in some places looks worse than a movie I saw way back in 2000, whatever. Also, The Matrix looks different now. And I don't know, like there used to be this green tint to things, and now it everything is like bright and oversaturated, and like it doesn't have the same look and feel to me of the original Matrix that we were in. So I actually found it kind of jarring sometimes when we're jumping back and forth, like where are we, what's going on, is this the Matrix, is this some other digital place, is this the real world? I just felt like it wasn't distinct enough. So it just, I don't know, it confused me a bit. And then when movies confuse me, I get pulled out of them, and I spend more time trying to unwrinkle the wrinkles than I do enjoying the movie maybe for what it is. So I'll just say this with a caveat. I'm not the world's biggest Matrix fan, so don't take my opinion as truth or gospel or anything like that. If you are a fan of the Matrix movies, this may have tripped your trigger. I will say Reddit is burning down over this movie. I don't know if either of you have checked out the subreddit for movies discussion for this film, but
intentionally no.
Okay, well, even 2 weeks later, I'm talking this is worse than Last Jedi level burning down of Reddit. I mean, huge fans of the Matrix are just like burning their copies of the original DVDs in protest over this movie. So I wish we had somebody like that here on the show that we could really talk to and find out why. If that's you in the live chat, let us know. We would definitely love to hear some thoughts from you around that.
Or if you, conversely, if you loved it, drop us a note as to what you really loved about it, please. Yeah,
absolutely. Let's hear from both sides. Will Durr says, jerk off to the ambiguity is now going into my vocabulary from now on. Glad you liked that, Will. So I would say this is a recommend for me if you literally have nothing else to see right now and you were a fan of the original films. Go see it. You probably have already. It's been out for a couple weeks at this point. And since it's available on streaming, I know a lot of people watched it at home rather than going to theaters. I just wanted to touch real quick on your experience, Will, and ours. We saw this in a movie theater with a bunch of other people. Did you watch it at home, Will, or did you see it in a theater?
We saw it at an Alamo Draft House.
Oh, you did? Cool.
Yeah.
Did you guys have did you have a big crowd for your showing?
Yeah, it was a pretty big crowd, all things considered. Ours was there was like, I think the front row was empty, but the rest of the theater was pretty filled.
Yeah, we had a pretty big group in ours too. All things considered with Miss Rona, it was nice to see a movie with a big crowd and hear reactions, and it was definitely a fun experience being able to see it that way.
Yeah.
Cool. So I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to talk about non-spoiler wise, or should we just rip the Band-Aid off and get into it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to go into spoilers. There's nothing we can talk about as soon as we start to get into any of, I was like, oh, okay, well, I need to talk about, Brad mentioned this, and earlier Jim mentioned that. I literally can't answer anything in the non-spoiler section, right? And I think the same probably goes for the two of you as well.
Yeah, let's tear into it in. And again, I'm with you, Brad. I don't want to like turn it into like a big pile-on, of just negative stuff. So I want to hear from people who like the movie. And there's, like I said, there are certain things about this movie that I really like too. So I'd rather talk about those.
Yeah.
All right. Don't worry, it won't be a complete pile-on.
No, I meant from me.
Yeah.
I meant from me specifically, but yeah.
Well, all opinions are valid. We can talk about how we feel. That's okay. I think we're all mature enough, to be able to do that. But certainly, if anybody in the live chat wants to share their thoughts, we may not be able to get to everybody, but we'll certainly read some of those on air, and they could be part of our discussion. That said, Jim, Will, let's do this thing. Spoilers for The Matrix Resurrections are officially fair game if you've not yet seen the film and you value your sacred virginity where the plot of this movie is concerned. Now is your time to step away. Bobby Miller, we will see you later. Thanks for tuning in, friend. So good to see you. Sorry you got to jump away. But folks, if you are listening live, why don't you come on back in about 25 minutes or so? You're not going to want to miss our plugs. If you're listening through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., Feel free to skip ahead using the time index in the show notes to skip the spoilers section, go right on to plugs, collect your $200 as you pass go, and feel free to go on from there. But I think I'm done rambling, guys. I think we've given people enough time to jump away. Where do you want to start?
Where'd you start? I think that one of the things that I appreciated the most about sort of like what this film wanted to get back in and do, and I think that it kind of matches what The Matrix has always been about. These are films that are about authority and the ways that authority sort of like uses different machinations to control the masses. That's like the big metaphor, right? And you can like drill it down into kind of wherever you want from there. The Wachowskis have both mentioned this is also a trans allegory, and for the way that there's this sort of like element of control that society puts on trans persons to be a very specific way, and it sort of takes this radical reawakening and sort of breaking away from those structures of control to be able to live an authentic life. All of those things are present here, and I love that. I love that this film also explored. This was a film that was going to get made with or without the Wachowskis. Sort of the how the sausage is made. The Warner Brothers was like, let's make another Matrix movie, and the Wachowskis were, I don't know, and they're like, well, we're going to make it anyway. And so Lana Wachowski was like, hold the phone, okay, if we're going to do this, then we're going to do it right. And so she used this story as a way to explore what it even means to be a sequel, reboot, remake within its own narrative. So we get to go back into the Matrix. This time it's a new type of control that's being placed. This time it is shinier, it is prettier, because things have changed. It's a different version of the world using a different way to try to coerce people into living their day-to-day lives. The first one was all about how there has to be at least a little bit of misery, otherwise people would realize that it's a simulation. We get some of that here, but an evolution thereof, and we get to see it not only through the lens of what the Matrix is, but also the video game, The Matrix, that is made by the Thomas Anderson character within the game, who is also offered by Warner Brothers the ultimatum of like, this is going to get remade with or without you. So what are you going to do? I thought that was a great way of like, I think that we don't often see. I think we talk a lot about like some of the bigger studio movies. Like if you think about like the Marvel movies, right? How, love them or hate them. And I tend to, I love them, but they tend to not be like creator driven as much as they're producer driven franchises. Right. Whereas the Matrix, the story of this is a very creator driven story. This is Wachowski's forward, backwards, sideways, all up against the walls. And I love that. I love that this is a story. Is there going to be a Matrix 5, and are the Wachowskis going to bow out of it and then it's going to be something completely random? Who the hell knows, right? Warner Brothers will do it. Warner Brothers is going to do just as every big studio is going to do. But as of right now, this is still a story told by one set of creators using their, movies are made by hundreds of people. Mm-hmm. But the driving force, the Wachowskis themselves, they've been in the steering, the catbird seat the entire time. So all of that thematically and narratively, I just loved the way all of those elements clicked into place and told a very, dense but very singular story.
Yeah, I Will, there's a lot to what you just said, and the allegory, the trans allegory part of it works, and the control allegory, all of that is there. I just wish it wasn't in such a a complex movie. It felt like the movie and was just trying to just make itself as complex as possible, between these two worlds. And I mean, the movie starts out with basically a almost shot for shot redo of the beginning of the first movie, I think, right? Where, and then it kind of goes off in a different direction. Another thing that's confusing is obviously the original. Help me out with the character, Lawrence Fishburne's character,
Morpheus.
Yeah, Morpheus is a different actor. playing that role, right? And in my mind, I'm like, okay, is it supposed to be the same character, or is it a different person, or is the Morpheus just a title of somebody who can be different people? That's what I'm trying to understand a little bit too. And maybe that's, generally movies most of the time don't change actors kind of midstream. So I'm wondering what kind of happened here with that. Will, do you know that?
Yeah. He's a program based off of the original Morpheus, right? As opposed to being Morpheus.
He's not in the movie. He's not meant to be the original Morpheus.
He's not the same dude. So the way that the movie is set up is, so first of all, they've kept to their lore and their
like a trill.
And in like the online game, they killed off the Morpheus character, right? So they decided, instead of just ignoring that happen, they would just write that into this movie and work around it. And the very beginning of this movie, that opening scene, that's a shot-for-shot remake, that's the video game that, inside the Matrix, the Thomas Anderson character made a video game called The Matrix, which was a popular video game that looks like the movies that we saw back in, the early aughts, but which is also him just sort of like remembering all of these experiences that he went through. And inside basically like a private server that he was using to toy around with stuff, he made a version of the Morpheus character. So it's like a scripted version of it that begins to gain sentience through just like the AI evolving, and it gets pulled off into the main Matrix, which is why he doesn't actually have like a body outside of like little stuff. So they go through all of that, kind of like why it's like the remake and kind of where it is. So it's sort of like, and it's a programmed version that's like part Morpheus and part Agent Smith that makes that new Morpheus character. And that's why he sort of was, he had some of those more rigid gestures as well.
See, so, I'm like super impressed that like people, fans like you, Will, are able to like understand all those different facets of the movie, because I gotta admit, and maybe they kind of leave me in the dust a little bit. I'm looking for a feel movie more than a think movie. And I don't mind thinking during, in movies, don't get me wrong, but when movies are so multifaceted that like I can't keep characters straight and places straight, dimensions straight, and it's just difficult for me to absorb what the movie is doing and absorb it as a work of art, other than just pretty pictures and actors on the screen. So I think that's where it loses me.
I would say that's fair. And I think, not everybody has the same, I guess, level of understanding of what's going on, especially if you take a look at Reddit. I mean, there's so many arguments right now about what this Morpheus thing was actually supposed to be, what it represents, how it came about. I don't know that the movie necessarily makes everything clear, so you're kind of filling in some of the gaps yourself based on what little information is sprinkled out to you. There's a comment from Ben in chat, actually, who says, Morpheus is just a role. It's Morpheus's role to find the one.
Yeah.
So, but here's the thing.
The one what?
And this is one of those questions I was talking about earlier that the movie raises and doesn't answer. I thought the one was the one. But apparently it's the two, because at the end of the movie, Trinity can do everything that Neo can do. So apparently she's also the one. But was Morpheus sent to find Trinity as the one? I get very confused about this.
So one of the things that the analyst character, gosh, I keep thinking like, are we in spoilers? Yeah, of course.
We're in spoilers now, so let it out.
So one of the things the analyst character was talking about, which is the Neil Patrick Harris character.
Watching too much Dexter.
Oh yeah, is that it's all of the original iterations of the Matrix that kind of kept going. We're always around finding the one, right? Like it was always around this one singular thing. And one of the things that that ended up doing is sort of masking the fact that the Trinity connection was as powerful a part of that whole one as it was. So it wasn't that Morpheus like was not programmed to find it. It was just that it was in the original movies. It was almost like, what's the right way to put this? Almost like all the focus was on the one that the other one wasn't really paid much attention to. But that all of the major moments with Neo in the first trilogy happens because of like the connection to Trinity, and this movie explores that a little bit more further, a little bit more fully, I guess.
But it's not really the one, then, is it? Like the one denotes like the special chosen one who can do all the things. But if Trinity and Neo can both do all the things, it's not really the one anymore.
And I think that would be I would argue that that's one of the points of the movie, right? Like it's not that they weren't counting they weren't counting right. It was that it's almost like, and I hate to use this phrase because I think that it's used poorly pretty often, but the whole like behind every great man is a great woman type phrase, which is usually used with like, it's usually used in like some very shitty phrases. But what I think the intention of it used this very specific way is that, a lot of times there's this one figure in history that's kind of pushed forward and everyone lauds them on that without realizing that kind of the female counterparts are usually as important, if not more important. And they just sort of get sidelined in history. And I think even within the narrative of the Matrix, that's happened historically to the Trinity characters. So yeah, as Ben says here in chat, without Trinity, there is no one. Trinity is the catalyst to realize the one. So that's
but she is if she has the powers and she can do all the things that the one can do, she herself has become a one, has she not?
Yeah.
Okay, so she's not just a catalyst. Like she's a full-fledged one.
Both.
Okay.
They catalyze each other. They're more powerful through their connection.
No, I get that. We had a 12-minute explanation of how that works, so I'm fine there. It's just the whole like one aspect. Jim, did I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think I did start to dig the relationship thing between Neo and Trinity in this movie. And, that then there was a thing about who was the other character. It was still Trinity, but there was a name. It was a different name.
Tiffany?
Tiffany.
Right? Oh, yeah.
In the coffee shop, kind of thing. That kind of stuff was starting to get a little bit interesting for me, but there was just too little of it for me. In the film, and maybe I was looking for more of that kind of emotional core of a movie instead of kind of like a intellectual core of the movie, where you kind of put the puzzle pieces together in your mind, and the fans of the movie, I think, maybe enjoy that too. But and when we get into plugs, I'll talk about a sci-fi movie that has a much more, there's sci-fi movies that have a much stronger emotional core than this one, at least to me. And I think maybe those are the ones I kind of gravitate towards or enjoy more.
I think for me, sci-fi is such a huge category, right? Like you can have anything from a movie like, I don't know, like a movie like Primer, which is like no budget and all just like complicated time loop shit, and it's not about feels, and it's all about 100% just like the mapping of things. Or you can have a movie like, I mean, hell, let's talk about like Star Wars or something like that. Those are not complicated movies.
Arrival, which
yeah. So I think there's so many different ways to cut it, and I think for me, it's less a matter of which one it is. It's more just a matter of how well it does what it sets out to do, right? If it's going to be a movie that presents like a complicated, like it, really wants to dive into like kind of like a complicated, dense storyline, how well does it do that? It's where something like Interstellar fell apart for me, because I think that was a movie that wanted to be more dense than I think it was able to pull off. It's why I think like better version of Interstellar would be something like Arrival, like to go back to the point that you had, because even the points of like kind of the feels from that, I think Arrival did better in its way. This isn't a review of Interstellar, but just like, you know, it's all about I think execution versus delivery on that execution. Matrix is always narratively dense. The first one was I think historically, I think one of the big problems, going to your Reddit thing, Brad, I think Matrix has historically been a very misunderstood property, in the way that, like, and I don't mean like, oh, people are too not to get it, but more like,
that's me.
I think there's been a lot of people who, like, the same with, like, I think like Rick and Morty has had this happen, you know, like where people will kind of take the surface level thing and then use it to like kind of warp their political view. That's why we got a lot of like really shitty people doing like the red pilling stuff, who I think the people that did that, like the whole, like, you know, like, oh, I'm an incel who is super like, you know, into this like red pill mentality of society, are not the type of people that the Wachowskis made the movie for. And I think that that's probably a little bit of what's probably feeding into some of the negative criticisms. Not that there can't be negative criticisms aside from that. Please don't get that wrong. But I do think that amidst all of those, there is a very loud, very narrow vocal group that I think is drowning out what might be more more like balanced criticisms, because they're the ones the loudest on the message board.
Yeah, there may be some degree of that. I'd be curious for you to dive into it and judge for yourself, because that doesn't seem to be the case, at least from what I'm reading. You definitely saw a lot more of that with The Last Jedi. But with this, I mean, this is mainly like middle of the road, big fans of the franchise who are just very upset that this was just a huge rehash of the original film, and it left a lot of dangling threads. Maybe they'll be picked up, maybe they won't. We don't know. Is another movie being made? I'm not sure, but I think it's very overgeneralizing to take away the agency of those middle of the road people who are just voicing their criticisms by kind of saying it's just, you know, the loud group that's you know, out there fighting against it. So I just want to
I want to make the point, though, like I was saying, it's a very narrow group that's that loud. Like, that's what I was saying. It's a very narrow group that's that very loud group. But what they're doing is the bad faith arguments that they're making are overshadowing, I think, what might be more legitimate criticism. That's the point I'm making. Not that the legitimate criticism isn't valid, but that this movie, like The Last Jedi had that as well. Like, you could go into like or not like The Last Jedi, whatever, but there were a lot of people who their biggest criticism was that an Asian female was Finn's new person. And before you could even do any discourse, you had to wade through all of that shit first.
Yeah.
And the incels' grip on the Matrix, unfortunately, has warped a little bit of that here. It's made it to where you have to just get past all of that shit before you can have legitimate discourse, to the point where I've been avoiding a lot of the social media stuff, because that discourse is incredibly toxic and incredibly, like, not my style.
I think you might be surprised by the middle of the road, just like common fans who are expressing their opinions. I really don't think it's an incel group that's drowning everybody out. I think a lot of people are legitimately you know, upset and are just sharing their opinions. They're not necessarily like trashing the film. They're not necessarily trying to make other people hate it. They're not going out of their way to, like, you know, they're not racist. I mean, they're just normal everyday movie fans who are kind of exploring why they didn't like the film.
What would you say is their biggest gripe? You know, the ones that have maybe, you know, possibly legitimate gripes that aren't like the incel loudmouth jerks. Like, one
of the big things is because the original films set up this whole idea of the one and the one's role in the Matrix, and, you know, the Matrix rebooting every so often and going through this phase again and again and again. You know, it sets up all these like amazing, you know, world building things, and then this movie completely breaks those things. Ben in chat says it's a new Matrix, and so it's not bound by the same rules, I guess, as the old Matrix. Ben says it's managed by the analyst. This is why Trinity is able to transcend her role. But I think there's a fundamental...
taking all the elements of that. It's taking all the elements from the quote unquote old Matrix and just like turning them upside down and like throwing some out and putting new stuff in.
And I think it's okay to do those things. I think that's great, but I think, and a lot of people I think would agree that the movie doesn't necessarily do a great job of explaining all of these things and making it all make sense, especially with Trinity, gaining her powers and becoming the one, or however you want to call it. The movie doesn't necessarily do a phenomenal job at making all of those things clear. Jim, as a casual, Matrix moviegoer, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but I mean,
casual.
It left you lost in many, many places to where you're turning to me and asking me, what's going, like, I think that's an experience that a lot of people have with this movie.
I think because, I was probably struggling with some of the original concepts of the Matrix, right? Already. And then, going into this film, kind of expecting, I don't know, maybe a deeper exploration of that, and getting something, getting more stuff thrown on top. And it's a hard line that the movie walks, right? Because if they just quote unquote rehash the old stuff, it's not going to be interesting to a group of people, right? And if they kind of try to subvert some of those things and flip some of those things on their head and make them interesting from a different angle, then they're going to piss off other people who are invested in the old stuff, right? So I don't know if the movie can win at this point unless it just totally goes off into something different than trying to explore, quote unquote, the Matrix. And it's hard to get that when it's right in the title. So yeah, I think it's, it's the same thing that happens with, like, the Star Wars stuff, and the more they get into it, there's more of an opportunity to leave some old fans in the dust, and not be interesting enough to capture new fans. So I think that's where this movie kind of falls.
I think that's not unfair from the perspective of, I don't know that I think this movie was, I think there was always going to be this type of reaction to some degree or another for this movie, right? And I think that's you mentioned the Star Wars movies. We've seen it with literally every Star Wars movie that came out. We've seen it with any time one of these franchises. I think Marvel is the only one that's sort of immune to it right now. But think about, like, what happened when, even the counterpart, WB's version of them with the DCU, which are basically reworking these Batman and Superman stories that have been around forever. We saw it with the new Harry Potter movies and the Fantastic Beasts. Like, it's sort of like do we cut too close to the original? Do we cut something very different? I think either way, this discourse is going to happen, and it's just going to be a matter of whenever those things happen, where you're at. The only thing I think keeps Marvel exempt from them is that they're churning them out so quick that we don't have a chance to sort of take a break. If we stopped making Marvel movies tomorrow, and then 5 years from now came out with the next one, we would be having the same conversations there in terms of, like, is this a Marvel movie? Is this too far away from a Marvel movie?
And I hate to make Marvel kind of the yardstick, because I have my own feelings about Marvel movies too. But if you kind of take a look at what this movie did with its franchise and its story versus what the latest Spider-Man movie did with its history, right, and the world and multiple universes that it set up, and what it did with it in this movie, I think that it's night and day to me. Kind of what that movie was able to do, No Way Home, I think it was called, versus what this fourth Matrix movie was able to do with its world that it built, and in its universe that it built. It just didn't it didn't seem to be at the same level for me.
And I think they make a very good counterpoint, because I think it really just, for me, it's sort of like scratched into, like, what I wanted out of the movies. Like, I really enjoyed Spider-Man No Way Home. I like Matrix Resurrections better, because I think Matrix Resurrections used its nostalgia in a more, instead of just using nostalgia as sort of like comforting references, which No Way Home did very, very well.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not, it's not, I loved Spider-Man No Way Home. But I think Matrix Resurrections took it and tried to explore something very new with it. And that's that's what I really want to hear. And that's why I'm also very okay if someone didn't like it. Brad, you mentioned the criticisms on Reddit. I want to go back to that real quick because I want to make sure it's clear. Like, I'm not discounting any of those at all. And not a bit, and I don't want it to come across that way at all. I said even up front, like, I think that there's, when you make a movie that is this personal and kind of takes as many chances as this one takes, you're going to have some really high highs and you're going to have some really low lows in terms of the reactions itself. And I think that's 100% valid. And for me, I think that it did nostalgia in a way that I haven't seen a lot of other movies do as well.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that you enjoyed it as much as you did, Will. I'll be honest. I mean, I'm a little envious that I didn't have the same experience with this movie. I was really hoping, going into the film that like this was going to rebirth the franchise. Everybody was going to love it. This would continue to be a thing, especially with COVID and lockdown and all the shit that we've had to endure over the last couple of years. We tend to take the good things where we can. And if this gives something for people to be excited about, I think that's fantastic. But I do agree. I think it is incredibly divisive. And I think there are a lot of conversations right now where, people are just naturally clashing, over this movie. I think the important thing is to recognize we can all have different opinions. We don't necessarily have to convince each other.
I think it's great. I think that's great that there's passion on both sides of an argument or of enjoyment of a property or whatever. And I feel envious. Not because I didn't like the movie. I feel envious because there's enough passion from both from you, Will, and from you, Brad, in different directions about this thing. Like this, you care enough about it to kind of, try to make these points. Mine is a little bit more of like just frustration and apathy a little bit, because I just don't have that investment, I guess, in the franchise to be passionate about what it did, what it didn't do. But ask me about Sing 2 and I'll give you some passion.
I fully get that. I like whenever like one of the franchises that I'm most like that with is the Fast and Furious movies, which I'm never excited about, nor am I upset about either. Like I sort of like, and people are just like, no, 3 is the best. You got to love 3. 5's the best. No, fuck that. 7 is where everything went wrong.
Han back, blah, blah, blah,
yeah.
blah.
And I kind of land in in the middle round. And that's, and again, like not all movies are cut for all people.
Or you don't, and I don't mean this to sound degrading, but like, or somebody just doesn't care enough or have the passion to get that, upset about something they find that they don't agree with, or to get excited about something they really, vibed with. Right. So, and that's a great analogy, Will, with you and the Fast and Furious series and me and the Trinity and the Matrix.
It's especially hard that we now live in a world where, and I think there's good and there's bad to this, but any of these like Warner properties or anything that has an HBO Max and theatrical release at the same time, versus like going to the Matrix versus Spider-Man comparison, everyone who saw Spider-Man had the exact same experience in that it was theatrical, right? Like some saw it on IMAX, some saw it, with just a couple people in the theater, some saw it packed. Maybe the audio was shitty in their theater, but they all got to see it a specific way. But you had people who saw it theatrically for the Matrix and they have that experience. You have the people who loved it enough that they could immediately rewatch it a bunch of times and then fall in love with all of the details. You had people who watched it while on their phone and then like didn't like it because they didn't get certain things, and you had everywhere in between, and all of those people watched different movies but were involved in the same discourse. And I think that's one of the challenging things that we're going to continue to face with sort of these day and date releases is, and I think that we do a good job of that, saying like, like, hey, this is how I viewed it, and this was my experience for it. But I do think that is going to make just sort of the overall conversations about these movies a little bit trickier going forward as that becomes more and more the norm, and it probably is going to be more and more the norm.
Yeah. All right.
Well, I just want to voice one final thought from my perspective. I know I raised some hullabaloo about Trinity also being the one and the confusion with that. I think it's awesome that she now has the same powers that Neo has. My question is it possible for other people to also become ones? Like, can additional people do what they're doing? And I'm
Bullet bubbles.
right. Yeah, I mean that was basically what he did the whole movie, right? Was the bullet bubbles. That was about it. But like can other people fly? Can other people like do bullet time? It sounds like it's just Trinity and Neo that can do these things apparently, but before this movie we thought it was just Neo. So I don't know. That's the interesting thing that
You like it, but you're confused by it, right?
exactly. In fact, I'll be honest. I would watch a Carrie Ann Moss, the one Matrix movie without Neo in it because I think she's amazing. I love her way more. But I guess I'm still curious as to how it works, and maybe I have to rewatch it 5 or 8 or 10 times to understand it. Maybe I'm just being dense, but things still don't add up there, and I don't know if there is going to be another movie, maybe they'll explain it in a way that or a way that Neo fights can better understand. I hope.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There we go.
Cool. Any other final thoughts? I got mine out.
No, I don't really have any final thoughts. I think I've kind of
Okay.
let out mine.
Yeah, none that I can't go on for
Okay.
like a long thing. Like again, I think that based on that, I think you've probably already watched this if you're listening right now. Especially if you're in the spoiler section and you haven't watched it already, then you done fucked up because this one we spoiled the hell out of. But I think at this point, I think coming into this one, I think you kind of knew what you were getting in terms of like, I liked this one or I didn't like this one. And again, our role here is not ever to, and definitely mine is never to change anyone's mind.
Right.
It's to talk about like what my perspective is. And so if you walked out of this one saying, nope, still loved it, nope, still hated it, that's 100% valid because your opinion is just as valid as literally anyone else's.
It was cool that King George showed up in this movie, though, right? King George from Hamilton showed up.
Yeah,
for a little while.
We had a Groff sighting here.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, don't get me started on Jonathan Groff as Agent Smith. I didn't understand that either.
It was the same thing with,
a piece of Agent Smith, and then a piece of Agent Smith was also Morpheus. I don't know. I'm confusing myself again. So.
We could be here for another 10 minutes. I think we're on
this
the
movie's not that confusing, Brad. Come on.
I know. If only I was smart enough to get it like everybody else.
No one's saying that.
No.
All right. Well, why don't we move on to some plugs, the part of the show where we put things on your radar that we love, that we think are great. We didn't get to do plugs the last couple shows, I think, because we had a double feature and then we had an extended Spider-Man No Way Home review last time. But Jim, why don't you start us off? What do you want to plug for our listeners this week?
I want to plug a film that's available right now for streaming on Apple TV that I don't know if many people have seen or are talking about, but it's called, and it's the second movie with this title this year that I've seen, which is interesting. It's called Swan Song. And this movie is, I talked a little bit about sci-fi mixed with drama and, kind of having an emotional core. This is exactly that. This one is a story. I'll read the synopsis. It's set in the near future, not in another universe, but in the near future. A terminally ill guy played by Mahershala Ali, who, guys, he is one of the best, if not the best actor we have going right now. And I just love everything that he's in. From we saw him right in Midnight, right? Or is that it? That the first one we saw him in? Yeah. He's a terminally ill guy. He's dying. And there's a solution to save his wife and his family from grief by cloning. There's a company led by Glenn Close, that clones and duplicates people without his family knowing. So basically, he'll be replaced in life by his clone, which is exactly like him, and has the same memories and everything. It's quite an interesting sci-fi premise. Very close to some other premises maybe we've seen before, but I think this is really well done. And yeah, I mean, like I said, this has got Mahershala Ali and Naomi Harris, who's awesome. Awkwafina makes a really cool, like, when you think of Awkwafina, you don't think of subdued performances, except in what was the one she did with her grandmother?
The Farewell.
The Farewell. She's really good in this. I wanted to see more of her, but again, it's called Swan Song. It's on Apple TV for rent right now. I can't recommend it more highly.
All right. Awesome. Jim, thanks so much. Will, what have you got to plug this week?
Yeah, so I wanted to do something kind of a smaller movie that I think, like, there's a lot of really good movies that I think are going to be talked about. Like, if you're looking at a lot of like year-end lists and stuff like that from different people, there's a few that kind of pop up in different places, and trust me, we're going to get to those when we get to our episode coming up in the next few weeks, whenever we get that scheduled for that. But I want to take something that's not showing up on a lot of those that I do think that people should give a watch to. It's a genre film. It's called My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To. You can find it streaming on, like, if you have Shudder, you have Amazon, you can like rent it. It's a new movie that came out this last year, and it's a horror / family drama. You have this guy named Dwight and his sister Jessie, and the two of them are taking care of their younger brother, Thomas, who is very sickly with this weird affliction. And you realize through the course of this movie that the only way that he can subsist is through drinking blood, and he can't go out in the sun. And it's like got vampirism, but it's not treated like cool, sexy vampirism, or like lurking in the shadows vampirism, or like black leather vampirism. It's treated like the way that, how you would deal with like a family member who had like some sort of like terrible chronic illness, and like the things that you would do, like the things that you would do to make sure that that family member stayed alive. And they are put in some situations where they have to make some pretty tough decisions in terms of what they're going to do and what they're willing to do to take care of Thomas. And the two of them start to differ sort of on kind of the morality of what they're doing. It's basically a family drama, but between this guy and this sister figuring out what to do about their vampire brother. It just happens to have that like horror backdrop to it. Super compelling, kind of a lo-fi horror film. But you mentioned films with like a lot of heart. I don't think this one wears its heart like on its sleeve in terms of like
heart in
big melancholic moments or anything like that. There's no like, there's not like that type of heart, but it's like, it really is like, what do you do when you're sort of stuck in this position where, if you don't do certain things that you don't want to do, a family member might die. And I think it's a really compelling piece. Again, it's called My Heart Can't. Yeah, I always keep saying My Heart Can't or My Heart Won't. My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To.
Very good.
All right.
I'll look for it on other platforms. I don't think we have Shudder, but we'll look for it.
Sweet. Well, Will, thank you so much for telling us about your plug. For me this week, my plug comes from a conversation we were having with a friend a couple weeks ago. We were all in the hot tub talking about just how much 2020 and 2021 had beat us down. And our friend mentioned that he had been watching a show that had been getting him through the pandemic.
And everybody else had been watching, apparently. And I'd heard of this show, but I'd never really sought it out. I'm not typically one to seek out like, home garden TV, cooking shows, whatever. But he told us about a show called The Great British Baking Show, or The Great British Bake Off, as it's called in the UK. It's on Netflix. We put on an episode of it just to check it out because he recommended it so much. And I got to tell you, this show has become like my new favorite thing. I've been struggling a lot. A lot of people have. But it's nice
to like put on this show where like people bake these awesome things, and yes, you have celebrity judges, who are big, I don't know, names in the cooking world in the UK, the baking world. It is a competition, they are fighting against each other, but everybody is so nice to each other. And even when they like make the worst things on the planet, the judges are still critical, but like they're nice about it and like they care. This show has just been a total breath of fresh air for me. At night when we're not sure what to put on, it's an easy thing to pop on and just love. Ben in chat says, don't talk to Will about Great British Bake Off. Will, I guess maybe you have bad feelings about the show, but they don't spoil my good feelings about it.
Exactly.
So if you're looking for something that is fun and light and airy, much like myself on good days, Great British Baking Show, maybe something fun for you to check out. They've got 12 seasons, 11 seasons on Netflix right now. I guess one of them just cycled off due to age, but there's plenty there to enjoy.
Oh, we'll get into it later.
To be fair, mine's based fully off of like I've watched one episode, and I watched probably the worst possible episode of it. And, so we can talk off air, but it's like I have nothing against the show, but I did just like, you know what, that soured me enough that I don't really need to dive back into this. So, but
gotcha.
I fully love the idea that like pandemic sucks. Controversial statement. Pandemic sucks. And
anything that gives people like any kind of light outside of what's beating us down these last couple of years, I'm all for it. Even if it's Matrix Resurrections.
Exactly.
Yeah. Even if it's the Great British Bake Off. Well, actually, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But like no, and seriously, that's exactly the point. Like. And it's why, like, barring like the occasional thing, you don't see me like I don't tend to like talk about what I don't like as much. Aside from this show, we obviously we like what we like, and we don't like what we don't like here on the show. But sort of outside of it, it's harder for me to like be negative about other things that I know someone else is enjoying, just because. Sorry, it's so fucking hard just to be these days. And so it's like there's no room,
but it's okay to have discussions about
it's okay to have discussions.
Oh yeah,
it's okay to not like things, don't get me wrong. There are people that will take it to like the next level. Like if you like or don't like the thing that someone else likes or don't like, it becomes like a personal attack and you have to dive right in. It's just like, man, fuck that. We're all like just scraping by these last 2 years by like, by our fucking fingernails. So there's no time to be anything less than just gracious, I think, to those around us.
Yep. Very well said. Awesome. Well, we had a whole bunch of folks with us live this week. So great to see everybody. We didn't get to read all of the comments on air, but we certainly were reading along as they went. Thanks so much for chiming in. For those of you who are watching, or I guess listening through digital tape delay, we definitely want to hear from you too. What did you think of The Matrix Resurrections? Let us know on Twitter. Tweet us at MB Podcast, or shoot us a message on Facebook. Movie Bears Podcast. We're really easy to find. In case folks want to chat about movies or whatever between now and our next recording, Jim, where can people find you online?
Yeah, I'm out there on Twitter at JJP Out West. My initials are JJP, and then Out West. That's my handle on Twitter. And I kind of lurk there. I don't post a lot, but if somebody sends me a message or ats me or whatever they want to do, I'm more than willing to engage with them. I'd love that. Also on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Will, how about you?
You can find me on Twitter and on Instagram at Whatever Cove. Find me on Facebook, William Lindis. Find me on letterboxd.com, where I give all of these movies that I watch a star rating and sometimes a review. Just look for William Lindis there. And I'm also on TikTok making thirst traps. I don't know, just bullshit content on TikTok at The Movie Bear. Follow
All
me
right.
on any or all of them. Send me a message. Just say hi.
All right. Thanks, Will. Appreciate that. Folks, you can find me on Facebook, mostly. Just look for Brad Harris. I'm the one who likely has Bear Chub Chaser friends in common with you. I plugged my letterbox, but I haven't really been using it. Maybe this is the year I will become consistent.
This is the year.
And log every movie.
Here.
I have this thing. I don't make resolutions because I know they're not going to happen, but maybe it will be something I try. I don't know. We'll see. But you can find me on Letterboxd at iBradPro. Maybe if you send me a message, say hi, it'll encourage me to actually use it and log all my films. I got to go back and do some of that anyway, because we have our top films of 2021 show coming up, as well as the MBP Awards show. A lot coming your way here in the next couple months. So we're going to be revisiting some of those films from 2021. Will, I'm probably going to crib your Letterboxd and find a bunch of the movies that I saw, because you have seen them too and have probably logged them and will remind me.
And Will, I think I need a tutorial on how to manage my time on Letterboxd, like how to kind of get in, get out, and get the most out of it by, in terms of logging movies without it taking over, my life.
Outside of the show, I've
Yep.
got a 60-second tip, but we'll do that off the air because
That'd be perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And Ben, who has been a total treat in the chat this week. Thank you, Ben. Ben says, Wave, thank you for bringing enjoyment on a very difficult day. Ben, not sure what's going on today, buddy, but I'm so glad that you were here with us and that we could maybe bring a little bit of light into your life. Thanks for bringing light into ours. We've really enjoyed reading your comments this week, especially so. Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
love you, Ben. Miss you, Ben.
All right, everybody. That is it for episode 422 of the Movie Bears podcast. We will be coming back at you soon with whatever the hell we're going to do next. We're going to figure that out as soon as we're done recording. But happy 2022, everybody. Be safe. Stay sane. No, be safe. Stay sane. There we go.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.